Viewers, welcome to PGurus channel, and I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I'm joined by Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji. We are going to talk about some very interesting developments happening in the United Kingdom. Pandit ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Pranam Sriji, it's always a pleasure. Our meetings seem to be becoming more and more frequent as the activity over here in the UK really hots up.
Yes, indeed. And also, I think we are becoming more as a reliable source of news for not just the Britons, but also worldwide, as everybody tries to, keep up with fast-moving developments in every country. Panditji, with your permission, I'd like to start first on looking at what has been happening in the Conservative Party, especially with Dominic Cummings, who I think is the equivalent of chief of staff in the American parlance. So there were some things on him. What is the latest status on that?
Well, you mentioned about PGurus becoming a reliable source of news, and that's quite pertinent to the whole issue with regard to Dominic Cummings. Literally for the best part of 2 weeks, maybe even 2.5 to 3 weeks, the whole of the media here in the UK was badgering and hammering. It's almost as though they smelled blood in the water, as they say, and were just baying for blood. And they lost all sense of proportion. They lost all sense of morality. There were journalists from the mainstream media banging on the doors of his parents' home, trying to get an interview. And the general public stood back in horror and thought, what is going on? The media really lost that centered position. And so the alternative news sources have really been able to get a good lead on this and bring things back to normalcy. We had one very main anchor suddenly removed from her program because she started to express opinions. This is on the BBC, and she started to express opinions as though they were factual. Literally, the left-leaning mainstream media in this country completely lost it. And Dominic Cummings enjoyed the support of the Prime Minister and has come through this. If anything, I suspect that his star has risen a little bit even further because it demonstrated so clearly how unpleasant and nasty the media can be. They seem to have lost sight of the fact that all of the rules which govern lockdown are intended to support and protect and preserve life and well-being. And so if a set of circumstances arise where health, well-being and life are endangered, it's foolish to say, well, I'm going to follow the rules anyway and allow a person's health to possibly deteriorate terminally. And so he exercised judgment within the guidelines and following the spirit of the guidelines and made a trip, and nobody else was jeopardized. The media thought, no, this is a great chance, we can get rid of him, and so let's all hound him. And it's not for nothing. The Brexit deadline is looming. And remember, the media really had its nose put out of joint when the British public decided they wanted Brexit. And many observers and commentators are now piecing the bits together and say, hang on a minute, Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson, they're the architects of the Conservative victory, which was aligned with what the British people wanted on Brexit. And so maybe if we get rid of Dominic Cummings, maybe we can even stop Brexit. So it's all going on. The civil service and the media are in there doing their bits to try and derail this thing. But Dominic Cummings has come through, and I have a suspicion that this will be old news within a matter of days now. So we're hoping to get back to a much more reasonable presentation of the news. There's so much else which is happening and which is worthy of attention.
This is a curiosity question, Panditji. In your opinion, how does the bureaucracy of Britain swing? I'll give you an example. In the United States, the armed forces tend to be Republican, and it's not clear which way the government, the officials in their personal capacity, which way they vote. But I'm willing to think that they are probably split 50-50. How does it happen in the United Kingdom?
It's not quite clear-cut. It's similar. The civil service, the public sector traditionally have been left-leaning. But what we also saw was that the left voting public actually shifted on the issue of Brexit. And so all of a sudden there were crossed wires and people really didn't know how to handle it. The the challenge in front of the left-leaning civil service, the media, public sector, and so on, is that the public are really beginning to call the shots. And you can't really impose dogma, which is political dogma or academic dogma as to how a country should work, on people's lives and expect them to change the way they're living, change their value system just to suit your political theory. And I think the Conservatives learned that with the Eurosceptics. The Eurosceptics were trying to impose, the pro-European lobby were trying to impose their wishes on the electorate, but the electorate had a different idea. In the same way, the left parties, the left media have always been trying to impose their wishes and judgments onto the public, but the public has a different idea. And we're seeing this played out now in every political theatre.
And I think this is in no small amount because of social media. It's now playing a very prominent role in our society. Many of us, in fact, wake up to what's new in whichever favorite platform we use. And so let's move on to the next question I have. This is looking at the Labour Party. Keir Starmer has been doing a fair amount of nimble balancing back and forth and so on. And I see that the London City mayoral elections are coming up in a year's time, which means that they must be laying the groundwork to make sure that they come back to power. Yet I see some rumblings about the way Sadiq Khan is handling the COVID issues in the city itself. What are your impressions on this?
Very astute. You're absolutely on the pulse again. The elections are in 2021 in London and in other metropolitan cities as well, Birmingham, for example. And we can see that there are signs that planning has started. For example, we have been talking about Keir Starmer's position on Kashmir. All of a sudden, out of the blue, the Labour Party policy was changed right at the top, ignoring things like the conference motions, which are democratic motions passed by the whole of the party. All of that was brushed to one side and a new policy position was taken. Now, it takes a lot of courage to do something like that, or it takes a person who has decided and done his calculations and come to the conclusion that he can take the hit. Now, if you bring the mayoral elections into this perspective, an interesting picture starts to form. Let's bear in mind that in the north, which was the traditional Labour heartland, they were removed. There was a red wall across the top of the north of England, and that red wall just disappeared. And so they've lost their heartlands there. Now, if you look at London, London has always been a very core, stable platform for the Labour Party. And so if you look at the mayoral election, Sadiq Khan has not made a great name for himself. He has not captured the moment and done a great deal of work and service to the London population in this time. There's a rising sense of immense dissatisfaction with the way he's performed. And if you add to that, his past performance wasn't particularly good anyway. And so in London, the Labour mayorship could possibly be threatened. Now, if you think of the demographics in London, an interesting figure arises. Zach Goldsmith lost to Sadiq Khan by a matter of a couple of 100,000. I think it's about 400,000. Now, the population of people who are pro-Indian politics, Hindus, Sikhs, etc., in London, who traditionally vote for Labour, if that were to shift, then we could see the London mayoral competition become a very, very close race. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has sat down and said, look, we need to keep London. We've lost the North, we've lost Scotland, right? The Conservatives got an 80-seat majority. If we lose London, then the Labour Party will be decimated. It will be decades before it manages to put itself together to form a credible opposition. So if somebody has done their sums, they may well have decided we need to recover our lost Labour Indian voting bloc. And that would explain, that would be a good explanation for why Keir Starmer has done this. And the impact of that is now being felt up and down other parts of the country as well. we're hearing rumblings coming from the north, where, as I mentioned on the last one, we've had 100 mosques who said we're going to shift our votes en bloc, right? And that's not really a democratic way of doing things, and its ripples are beginning to be felt. Birmingham also has a mayoral competition coming up. The elections are coming up in 2021, and it'll be interesting to see how the voting bloc there starts to leverage its power. If I can give you an example, they're already making a lot of noise about the Birmingham Muslim community voting against Keir Starmer. Only a couple of days ago, we had a newspaper article, which this is from the left-leaning press. The rage in Birmingham is unreal. Keir Starmer's position on Kashmir will damage the Labour Party. You know, this is a very stark statement from the Birmingham community, and they're actually getting ready for the Birmingham mayoral elections. So Keir Starmer is going to be faced with which one does he take? Does he go for London and abandon Birmingham? And if so, what are the consequences? Or does he listen to the traditional Muslim Pakistani vote bloc within the Labour Party and actually reverse his position? If you look at the Labour website as at today's date, they have still very comfortably broadcast a very simple statement that he's repositioned Labour and the Kashmiri situation, the position on it is unchanged. His statement stands. And I think that's actually a courageous and wise thing for him to have done. And hopefully he will stick with it. But a lot of these little jigsaw puzzle pieces are beginning to move now, and an interesting picture is emerging. I think we have to appreciate the work that he's doing there.
One quick question. People can do projections based on how the population of London voted in the recently concluded parliamentary elections to try and project how much of a shift in the British Indian vote has taken place. And perhaps they can apply those numbers for the London civic polls also. Has anyone done that exercise in your opinion?
I'm sure they have. Absolutely confident they have. If somebody like myself can get hold of a little newspaper article and get a piece of paper, scribble down some numbers and see what it's totting up, it doesn't take much to be able to see these pictures forming. So I think they have done it. But I think behind it there is another sense as well. And that is in the same way that Boris modernized the Conservative Party and brought it into line with the centre right. I think that Keir Starmer is the sort of person who will try and modernize the Labour Party and bring it into the position of the centre left. And remember, he's a trained lawyer, former chief of the Crown Prosecution Service. And so he is aware of many of the factors that perhaps previous leaders weren't aware of. He'll be aware, for example, that the United Nations resolution required Pakistan to remove its invading forces before anything else could be done, and Pakistan didn't do anything about that. So it's actually in breach of the United Nations resolutions. And I can't see a lawyer of Keir Starmer's caliber actually saying, oh yeah, I can pretend that doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. So if you take that on board, take on board his desire to bring it to the center of British politics, align more closely with the wider public, then I think his strategy is sound, and it will help. It'll go a great way to perhaps salvaging some of the Labour Party's lost credibility.
People in the know have said that not one person speaks Kashmiri in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir today. It has been completely Punjabified, as has the rest of the country of Pakistan. And it's really the way they have gone about doing this thing, suppressing democracy. I think democracy died a quiet death, and with I think maybe Liaquat Khan getting assassinated after that, it has not ever been a democracy, although they do have an elected government and so on and so forth. But there are few takers about have people enjoying a democracy in Pakistan. So that's a topic for another day. Let's look at the positioning of political parties, Satishji. Now, if you look at what is happening now as we are slowly coming out of the coronavirus syndrome. We are going to have mob immunity. The younger generation seems to be able to withstand this quite effectively. And then those who are vulnerable need to take adequate precautions. But the most important thing here is people are going to be homebound, and they're going to try and get their work done from the confines of their office room, or sometimes even their television room, wherever they are comfortable with. So this is a new reality. There is no way of denying this. So what is it going to mean to people who are, politicians, for example? This is my projection, Sarji, and I could be wrong, but I believe that the old method of, going down, going to pubs, going to coffee houses in the morning, talking with the local population, forming and shaping opinion, that perhaps is going to be more difficult now, because before they come to the pub or to the coffee house, there have been 4 different opinions given, and everybody is completely armed with data that's coming from whatever be their source of news information. So what happens is, unless these parties have a way to try and get into that space and shape and give effective messaging. I don't want to say shaping the news, but I would like to say the correct stance. Truth will win in all these things. You cannot keep on lying, because lying also is an art. It's a big art. It's not easy.
But you see, the implication of what you're saying is actually very, very far-reaching. One thing that this COVID has done is it's allowed us to have the time and the space to shift our communications methods from phones, from newspapers, from meetings, from gatherings into these screens. There are massive conferences being held now using these screens. Every family has got Zoom on their phones and everywhere else. And so all of a sudden, this has become our source of receiving and disseminating information. It's not going to be long before a Trustpilot type website, or websites where people can record their experiences, start to become broader in their approach rather than products. You have some wonderful books on Amazon, for example, and people read them and they review them. And as you say, they gather information about competitive products. Of course, it's going to happen that people are going to be able to now know that voting patterns for politicians are online. People will be able to have hustings online. Everybody is having debates online now.
Right.
So this mechanism is there. And you're right, before people go and make a decision, they will have had multiple sources, multiple research avenues to form an opinion which is better informed than ever before. And this is quite remarkable. One of the other things that's happened is not only do they get the capacity to form a contemporary opinion, but they have the capacity to form a historical opinion as well, because nothing disappears. One of the examples I wanted to give you, I mentioned that the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, I feel, is going to bring it into the 21st century. And that means possibly having to jettison some of the extreme parts of the party, right? Somebody wanting to research the position of Keir Starmer or the Labour Party on Islamic infiltration, for example, you just type that in and straight away you see articles where one of the major problems of the party was highlighted in the mainstream media, and the research is immediately relevant. Islamic radicals infiltrate the Labour Party. And this has been, as an example, one of the drivers behind the core vote of the Labour Party saying, hang on, why are our elected politicians interested in a local dispute between two countries 6,000 miles away when we have food banks, we have an education problem here. British children are not achieving educationally as much as they should do. We have problems with the economy. We have problems post-COVID in resurrecting a profitable, functioning democracy. Why on earth is so much emphasis being placed on chasing a political situation which is nothing to do with us? People are going to be very, very much more informed. And so, yes, the political classes are going to have to accelerate. I ultimately think it's a force for good, because the more informed the public is, the better the quality of judgment the public will arrive at. And then the public will be able to take corrective action to teach politicians the realities of life and keep them in line, keep them in the mainstream, keep them in the center, either side of the center, which is where the bulk of the British public, political public, are. They're just either side of the centre. And these dalliances with the extremists, that's going to disappear. So yes, this new post-COVID world is going to leave people with a massive amount of intelligence gathering capacity and a much, much more improved ability to come at good judgments. A very, very positive outcome.
And also, I think what you're going to start seeing is consistency of politicians, the stands on various issues, and the strength on which they have formed those stands on opinions. I mean, if somebody can say, my stand on this is this, it's not the most popular, but here is why I'm taking this stand. And then the person, explains 1, 2, 3, this is why I'm doing this.
Yep.
Those things people will remember, because for good or bad, these things are, like you said, recorded for eternity, and that's going to be played back. So I think I'm hopeful that the politics of the world in general is going to improve, because your lies are going to be caught very, very quickly.
And hypocrisy is going to stand out so dramatically. If I can, you mentioned hypocrisy, if I can contextualize it using the current situation, we had a position of the Labour Party being in a very difficult situation because of its anti-Semitism record. And because it didn't do the appropriate actions in time, in a sufficient quality, we had resignations. Members of the Jewish community who were also Labour Party members, they resigned. Now, there are a number of front benchers on the Labour benches who are actually committed, staunch Kashmiris, and they have nailed their flag, as it were, to the success of the Kashmiri operation. Now, it'll be very interesting to see whether they actually stick to and do the honourable thing, stick to the guns, do the honourable thing, and maybe even resign in protest. And if we do see some resignations coming out from the Labour Party, especially from groups who are aligned with the Kashmir situation, that will be a really broad indicator that, in fact, what Keir Starmer has said, he does intend to deliver, and that is a more centrist, a more elevated, and a greater degree of wisdom in terms of international politics will be apparent, and that's got to be good news for the Labour Party. So yes, we will see this played out in front of us on social media, and indeed on lots and lots of video conferencing panels.
Yes, indeed. And it was a wonderful conversation today, Panditji, and it's always a pleasure to have you. And these are very interesting times. I think it's full of opportunities. I'm myself excited because finally online portals are getting the respect they deserve. People are, looking at it, listening to it, looking at the reasoning behind some of the conclusions that you and I are arriving at, and many of my subject matter experts are arriving at. And I think this bodes well for the generations that are coming behind us for the future, because they'll know how to get that, that art of critical thinking. This has been my focus always. Don't take my word for it. Find out the other story, and you make up your mind which you think is the right one.
Everybody will become a big data analyst very, very soon.
So true, so true. Thank you very much. Namaskar, and hope to see you back again very soon.
Pranam ji, namaskar ji. It's been a pleasure. Om.